A warm welcome. We are only 24 hours late, so apologies for the challenges in bringing you this third and final edition of the 2020 Magpie Circle Live YouTube show. I think all in all, with our guest tonight, Leigh Curtis, yesterday against Hartlepool was a bit of a day to forget. Traffic on the way home, Leigh. What time did you get home?
About 9:10, I think.
9, and the game finished just after 5. Right.
Yeah, well, I left the ground at about 6 o'clock. Probably just after that, and then obviously coming out onto the A46 towards East Bridgeford, there just got snarled up, and I'm not sure what happened in the accident, but it seemed a bad one.
Well, it was all in all not the greatest of days, and of course with COVID, it's going to be a little bit of time before we're back in action. Tonight, wanted to talk clearly about Hartlepool. Let's review that, get it out the system. Wanted to look ahead to the opening of transfer window loans, which you've been talking about in the paper today, and online, as I should call it. I still call it the paper, geriatric that I am. And then I also want to shift the focus, and I want to investigate exactly what is going on at the National League, because it is increasingly escalating. The chief executive has already left the National League. The chairman is under huge pressure to resign. David Bernstein, the former FA, has produced an independent report and is clearly calling for change and is falling out quite publicly with Brian Barwick, who also is a former chairman of the Football Association. And this all revolves around allocation of monies from the lottery. Notts get 96,000 a month. Nearly 6,000 average. Boreham Wood average 724, get 85,000. So that's caused a lot of angst and anxiety, and we'll take a look at that, and also talk a little bit about Notts County's own finances, much more stable now under the REITs regime, with the publishing quite recently of the financial report. So that's what we've got in store tonight, Leigh. Let's crack on, because you are in a very, 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 I was going to say fortunate club, because me and everybody else watching can only see it on the live stream. You get to see it up close and personal from the press box or wherever you are these days in the ground. So you saw it. What did you make of the home defeat by Hartlepool yesterday?
I thought they were very unfortunate in the end not to get something from the game. I think on the balance of chances in the second half in particular, I thought Notts were excellent. Played with real verve and tempo and vigour, and it felt like if Notts had scored in that opening 15 minutes of the second half when they were excellent, I felt if they'd have got that goal, I think they would have gone on to win the game, because Hartlepool were creaking a little bit. But unfortunately, we keep coming back to that whole creating chances. I don't think Notts have a problem, as we've seen this season. They don't struggle to create openings. I mean, I can think of countless games where Dagenham, Boreham Wood, for example, and yesterday was another prime example of creating very, very good chances, but lacking that ruthless touch in front of goal. I mean, Ruben Rodriguez, it's the post from a yard out. Eli Sam gets his run wrong, should have a tap in from 2 yards. And it's those kind of chances at the moment that Notts seem to be struggling to take, and you do wonder whether they would benefit from an experienced, wily fox in the box, because obviously they lost Christian Dennis in the summer and never really replaced his goals. You've lost 15 goals there. Wes Thomas hasn't been fit. We don't know whether he's going to be back in the near future, how long it's going to take before he's back involved. But he scored 12 goals last season. So there straight away, there's 27 goals out of the team. Now, I think the leading scorer is Carl Wootton with 6, I think, this season. So, I do feel as if, Notts are certainly a team that creates plenty of chances, but they just lack that sort of ruthless touch. And if they can apply it at the start of the season, in the second half of the season, they'll do well. But it just seems to be quite frustrating at the moment that they keep spurning these fantastic opportunities.
That's quite interesting, because clearly a lot of fans have mentioned the departure of Dennis, and you and I have had conversations as to whether there is that goal scoring capability in the team. And I wouldn't disagree with you. I kind of come at it from another way, though. I think clean sheets. If you keep a clean sheet, you don't lose the game. And I wonder sometimes if some of the goals that we give away that put us behind the 8 ball in matches put a large amount of pressure on us to score 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your take about us at the back?
I think they're fine. I mean, my issue, I mean, when they put the squad together in the summer, I thought they did exactly the right thing. I thought they kept the centre backs together. They kept Rawlinson, they kept Turner, they kept Lacey. I mean, you have to remember, it was only Solihull Moors had a better defensive record than Notts in the entire league this season. I've looked at the league table again today, and I think in the top 7, if I'm right, I think it's the same case again. I think Solihull Moors only have a better defensive record than Notts in the league presently. And that's by virtue of the fact they've played less games because they've been on a COVID break. So my issue isn't with the back four. I think the back four is absolutely fine. But I take your point about keeping clean sheets. But when you're only scoring one goal here or there in a game, you then find yourself, because at some point a team is going to have a chance. You know, I always like to see teams, you know, go and kill teams off. And I think that's what Notts haven't been able to do. You know, certainly against Hartlepool, they should have killed them off. They should have scored, should have taken the lead and gone on to got all 3 points, given the quality of chances created. Boreham Wood, I can think that in the opening 5 minutes or opening 10 minutes, Enzio Baldwin went through 1-on-1. Carl Wotton had a header. Against Halifax, it was 1-1. Callum Roberts came off the bench and had a great chance to make it 2-0. In the end, they couldn't kill him off. What happened? Ben Turner ended up making a mistake. Halifax going to score. And I think that's the issue. I don't have a concern with Notts at the back, but I think there has to come a point where they put a bit of daylight between themselves and the teams that they're playing against. I'd just like to see a bit more ruthlessness in that respect and dispatch these teams.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't disagree with any of what you're saying. And it's not down to the back four that we necessarily concede goals. You defend as a team, you attack as a team. And when you look at things, given the investment that we have as a budget, the outsider might say, where is your 20 goal a season, man? I get that. But I think what can put pressure on us is, if you think back to the opening game of the season against Dover, you know, if we leave there 0-0, it ain't the end of the world. Look, it's not the end of the world that we lose 1-0, clearly. But you know how perception, supporter fan base is shaped. You know, Maidenhead coming to us and scoring the number of goals that they did shouldn't have happened. There's no way we should have ever lost that game.
No.
So I agree with you. To an extent, every club in the National League is looking for the 25, 30 goal a season, man, isn't he? You know, I remember Martin Allen, when he joined us in one of our podcasts earlier this season, he said probably the single biggest ingredient he would look at for a team to get promoted, and he had this with Barnet when he got Barnet promoted. He picked John Akinde up from just up the road at Elfreton.
Yes,
and clearly John Akinde was a cut above everything else in the National League that season, and has now established himself back in the Football League after being out for several years. Which kind of brings us on now to, what do you think the club, Neil, will be looking to do in January?
Well, I mean, the good thing about the National League is there's obviously no transfer window, is there? So they can sign players all year. I think that there's two crucial elements for me. They need to get Callum Roberts back fit.
Yeah, agreed.
I think when we talk about players who could score a double amount of goals, I think he could do it. I think he definitely has got that ability in his locker. Plus, I think he's the best player in the National League. So I think you're gonna miss players of that quality, and to only have him for 6 games or whatever it's been this season, I think it's 6. You know, that's been a huge blow, because a Callum Roberts in Notts County team, as we've seen, and he's proven time and time again, such an amazing talent to have, and can open up defences, and defences get absolutely petrified of him. They need to get Wes Thomas back. And I do think
What's the situation with Wesley? Because I know I know it was put out he had kidney stones. I had kidney stones 3 or 4, and I tell you, it's the most agonising thing I've ever had in my life. So clearly, I know he's been through a bad time, but he shouldn't be too far off coming back now.
No, I think I know Neil said last week in the press conference he had personal issues. I think I think he's recovered from the kidney stone now, and I think the personal issues which the club haven't elaborated on. But to get him back would be a massive boost, because his relationship actually with Carl Wootton up front is actually very, very good. They have a very good understanding. It was at the Altrincham game where I think he created 2 goals for Carl Wootton in that game. So to get him back would be a massive bonus. But it wouldn't surprise me to see the club go out and get a striker. I just think that could be the difference between them finishing in the top 3 or the top 7. So I would expect them to finish 2nd or 3rd if they go out and get a proven goal scorer. If not, I would back them to finish sort of 4th to 7th. I think that's the only thing that sort of makes me doubt their ability to go on and get those sort of the high positions. It's the scoring goals at the moment that's probably my biggest concern at present.
So the obvious follow-up to that point you've just made, Leigh, is you've not mentioned first spot. Do you think first spot is beyond Notts this season?
Well, I just don't. I can't see Torquay dropping 15 points. I mean, the way they're going at the moment. I mean, it could happen. I mean, it almost did with Barrow, didn't it, last year? So Barrow were absolutely flying, and who knows, Torquay could get 1 or 2 injuries. But I think the big difference for them is they've got Gary Johnson, wily operator. I know he's been promoted from the NAC conference before. He's managed in the Football League, so he knows exactly what he's doing. And however they're doing it at the moment, they seem to be getting results. They seem to be doing enough to get across the line. I know they scored a late goal yesterday to win 4-3 at Weymouth. So I think it would be a very, very tall order. Of course, Notts have got to play him twice. I mean, that's 6 points. But again, then you're looking at another 9 points to claw back, and you've got to win those games. So I think it would be very, very difficult to catch them. But if they can go on a run like they did last season, they're more than capable of doing it. And then, who knows what could happen. I backed them. I would have thought that they would have caught Barrow had the pandemic not hit. They were in such good form. They were unstoppable. They went to Barrow, produced an unbelievable, tactically great performance, then beat Eastleigh 4-0. And it just felt like at that point that nobody was going to stop them. They just looked like champions in waiting to me. I mean, they were so good. They weren't conceding goals either. They'd sorted out the back line. So, both important ends of the pitch were functioning brilliantly. So I mean, it could happen. It could well happen, but I do worry, and it's been a lingering concern since pre-season for me, because I just felt that from having Scott Wilson, Christian Dennis, Carl Wootton, and Wes Thomas, only Carl Wootton's only under 25. The rest, Wes Thomas 32, Christian Dennis 28, 29. Scott Wilson was, I think, over 25, been around, scored 18 goals for Macclesfield when they won the title. So it just seemed a little bit of a gamble to sort of change the whole ethos of what had brought them so much success last season in terms of the 4 quality strikers that they had, to go for Eli Sam, unproven, bringing him into a new league. Got to get used to a very tough division. Jimmy Knowles, a teenager. I mean, we're expecting, and we're applying a lot of pressure on these players, when really, you could probably get away with 1, maybe, but to sort of have Sam, Knowles, Wootton, and obviously Thomas, and obviously Thomas has been out, you've sort of got 3 strikers, 2 of which are relatively unproven. So it just seemed a little bit odd, excuse me, just to sort of go down that track. And maybe they thought that they could unearth these players who would go on to be, gems. And Eli Sam has certainly improved since he first came into the club. But if you want to be winning promotion, I'm always a firm believer that you have to sort of have players who are ready for the here and now. It's very, Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, for instance, wouldn't go out and buy a relatively untried player if he was going to try and win the Premier League, for instance. So, it's those sort of things that I felt was a little bit strange, but outside of that, I thought the transfer business, midfield, defence was spot on. So it's just the forward line that really, I think, needs a little bit of attention.
One of the most interesting and revealing insights from the players this season, I think, was undoubtedly Ben Turner's interview after Stockport. And I think for all of us, A, it was very honest. But B, it was very illuminating, I think, in how Neil had challenged the players ahead of Stockport. And this may well be some kidology. It may be something he genuinely believes. But what Ben was relaying was that the manager had challenged the mentality of the players, not the ability. We have 2 players for every position. That has been one of Neil's mantras since he come here. That is something that eludes 95% of every other club in the National League. So I don't think there would be too many National League clubs would want to collectively change squads with the group of players that we have assembled. But I think mentality is a very important part of it. And this was the point that Ben was making, that Neil had challenged the players' mentality. Can you, deliver what you are capable of delivering? Can you do it? And I think that playing for Notts County in the National League is very different to playing for Wealdstone, to playing for Boreham Wood, to playing for Bromley, who did very, very well last season, and for that matter, for Barrow last season. There's an expectation to deliver week in and week out, and that expectation is you win up to 2/3 of your games, because that's what's expected by the fan base. The ownership would clearly, I think they've conducted themselves extremely well, but they've not put this squad together to finish 10th. I would say the absolute baseline is playoffs this season. Absolute baseline. And clearly Michael Doyle is a warrior. Yeah. Absolute warrior, irrespective of age, is available every week, playing in and out of his skin. What do you think this group of players has the mentality to be able to cope with the expectation that the fan base, the clubs expect to win most games? Every Notts fan expects Notts at some point this season to go on a run that is comparable to what Torquay have already done. And I don't actually think top spot is out of the equation, because we kind of think at every Christmas that we're halfway through the season.
Yeah, but we're not, are we?
We're not.
No.
We're only just touching 1/3 of the way through the season.
Yeah.
44 games, should be 46, but Macclesfield are. So 44, you're looking at best part of 28, 29, 30 games to play. So I don't think Torquay are away at all. But unquestionably, a team like Notts or other clubs, and I'm only interested in Notts and interested in your thoughts, they've got to go on 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 games, winning 9 or 10 of them and losing 1. Can this group of players do that?
Well, they did it last. They did it last season, didn't they? They went on that amazing unbeaten run. I mean, to be honest, I had a look at the stats today because I was interested to know, what Notts' record is in the National League and in all competitions since the start of last season when they put the squad together in 3 weeks. And I think, and I'm pretty sure the figures of this, 62 games played in all competitions, 16 defeats. Now, that tells you that's a pretty good record, 16 defeats in 62 games, and they won a large percentage of them as well. But I think they are capable of doing it. But of course, everything's got to fall into place. I mean, last year, when they went on that great run, Callum Roberts was in absolutely terrific form. Carl Wootton couldn't stop scoring. Christian Dennis was banging in the goals. So a lot of things have got to click into place. The back four were very, very good. Alex Lacey and Connor Rawlinson had formed a fantastic partnership in the heart of the defence. Sam Slocum is I think one of the best goalkeepers I've seen here in the 6 years that I've been covering the club. He's very solid, very seldom gives anything away. So So I think all the ingredients are there. It would help if they could get their best team out consistently on the pitch, because they haven't been able to do that this season. I mean, we saw against Barnet, I think, when Callum Roberts played, Wes Thomas, Rodriguez, Baldwin. It was having those sort of four players out on the pitch at one time would certainly help them. And I think that and getting the momentum and stopping having these COVID breaks, because that must be infuriating, Neil, at the moment, because you can't get any momentum going. You play one or two games like Christmas. They're going to play once in 3 weeks, is it? So the next game, I think, is January the 9th, Eastleigh away. So you've got, by the time the games come around, Notts could potentially be out of the top 7 anyway. So it's been frustrating. I tell you what, I do think, and I don't think this is a surprise. I think they do miss the fans at home. I think that is unquestionably has been a major factor this season, because that place, when it's rocking, is a formidable place to go, especially when they attack the Kop in the second half. And obviously the Kop's near enough full for most games. And I just think that teams are coming here to Notts County and finding it relatively not as a formidable experience as it would be if Meadow Lane was busy and the fans were singing and, the Kop trying to suck the ball into the back of the net. And I think the players miss them as well, to be quite honest. I think the players miss that kind of atmosphere, miss having the fans, geeing them up and trying to kick every ball for them. And it's no surprise to me that they're at the home record. They've lost to Borehamwood at home, they've lost to Hartlepool. I don't think they would have lost those games last season, in terms of if the fans were there. So I do think that's been a big issue for Notts, because it's sort of taken the advantage of playing at Meadow Lane away. Teams are coming to Meadow Lane now thinking, right, great pitch, lovely stadium. Oh, added bonus. Then we haven't got 6,000 fans to think about. So, that's been a big miss. But I think Notts are a really, really great team to watch. I think they're, for a team to play like they do in the National League, I think it's fantastic. And, got to give credit to Hartlepool, because I think they were probably the best footballing team I've seen this season. To do that, and I think they're well coached. They don't have a problem with creating chances. Scoring goals just seems to be this problem. And if they can sort that out, then I do think they can go on this run that they're talking about. I mean, prior to yesterday, what was it? 1 defeat in 9? What is it now? 2 defeats in 10 or something like that. So, they are sort of in a decentish run, but you just think, just like to see him go and batter a few teams.
Yeah, I think it's very well put, and I think the point you make about home fans is very valid. The reality is that Notts at this level will always be judged against the expectation of competing alongside and equally with the very best team in the division. Yeah, that's just going to be a fact of life. And that's when I talk about mentality of players, manager, everybody at the club. That's what it is. That's what it is. You can dumb down expectations and Stockport are the best team in the league or whatever. I'm sorry, our fan base and as a club where we are now, it's a difficult sell. That's a difficult sell, because we have got 2 players in every position. We have got a squad and a budget and a group of players that very, very, very few other clubs would wish to swap with. And that is always going to be the challenge for Notts. When we talk about, you're quite right, we don't lose many, but we, the critics or the people that get easily disappointed will say we've lost 2 out of our last 3 home games.
Yeah.
So you can play with the stats, and you
suppose it's glass half full, glass half empty, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, you need to look at this properly, and I think the people that we need to change this, we change that. Don't be silly. Everyone has the right to an individual opinion, but Neil Ardley serves the best interests of this football club to get out of the National League this season. End of. I see people say, the Cowleys all come, Fantasy Island.
Just
Absolutely. Like, you're in the game. I've been in the game a long time. Absolute Fantasy Island stuff. Neil Ardley is the best manager for this football club to get us promoted this season, right? In my opinion, end of. At the end of the season, clearly you would take a more considered approach to it. We are only 1/3 of the way through the season. But again, I get back to my point is this group of players need to be able to cope with the mentality of the weight of expectation on them, because they need to be winning 2 out of 3 games. Yeah. Only losing 1 in 5, 1 in 6.
Yeah, I mean
that is what is expected of them.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've seen, haven't we, in the past that the shirt can weigh heavy on a few players' shoulders. History has told us that, hasn't it? But I do believe they've got strong. Got Michael Doyle who's played for some big clubs. Jake Reeves has played for Ben Turner. I know he had a bad game yesterday, but he's been superb of late. Conor Rawlinson, another leader. Sam Slocum may not be the most vocal, but he leads in his own way by his performances and how solid he is in every single game. So I do think there are leaders in the team, and certainly have the capability to deal with the expectation. But we're going to keep probably coming around to the same thing. It's having that. It's all right, creating chances and looking pleasing on the eye. At the end of the day, you need to be sticking the ball in the back of the net. And last season they didn't have a central midfielder who scored 10 goals. If you put John Rooney in Notts County win the title. They've not. I think Jake Reeves has got 2 this season. Michael Doyle's got 1. They do a fantastic job, and I think they're absolutely fundamental to the way that Notts play. But of course, that's 2 positions that you're not expecting 10 goals from. So then who are you going to get 10, 15, 20 goals from? So you're then relying on your attacking players. I think Enzio's on 4, is he? And so, it all comes down to scoring goals. You like to say, you build your spine of the team, and defensively, centre halves are very good. Centre midfield's very good. Carl Wootton, a lot of pressure's being placed on his shoulders. But, if he was to get an injury, by the way, Notts really would be struggling, I think, up top, really. And that is another fear that, at any one moment, if he pulls a hamstring or does his groin or takes a wax and out for 3 or 4 weeks, then, who's going to lead that line? Because, again, he's fundamental to the way that Notts play. They like to play off him, and he likes to play with his back to goal. They haven't got another player like that who can do that. So, that's probably why. Listen, it's great. I mean, we're sitting here spending imaginary money, but I think if it was me, I would probably go out and see if I could get a centre forward who's 25 to 30 years old, maybe even over 30, who's been around a bit, got a proven goals record. I mean, it's easy to say, but somebody like that who's maybe not involved somewhere in the Football League, maybe looking out just to come out on loan for till the end of the season. I think it would help Notts massively. And I think it would help Carl Wootton as well, because, at the moment, a lot of expectation and the burden of responsibility of scoring the goals is being placed on his shoulders. And we forget he's 23. That's an almighty burden to place on a player who's 23 years age, to say, like, you're going to carry the fight for us this season. You're going to be the man to get us 20 goals. He's still learning his game. He's still in the embryonic stages of his career. And I think actually a seasoned centre forward would actually help the younger players. It would help the likes of Sam. It would help the likes of Jimmy Knowles. Somebody who could just watch him in training, see how I think it would be a massive boost if they could do it. But again, it just depends, A, whether they're out there, B, can you afford them?
Do you think there's any danger that Notts could lose any players in January? A good agent, and I've seen, a variety of clubs being linked with Kyle Wootton. And of course, the agent's not doing his job properly if he isn't putting the names out there. Do you think there's any risk that Notts could lose any players? Wootton would be one potentially. Kel Roberts, he's injured, so that probably helps the situation. But do you see any of Notts' better players going? Or do you think what we've got is what we'll have, and it's a case of just adding to that?
I think it's a case of adding. I mean, I saw those rumours about Carwood, and I did have to laugh because I looked at the clubs who were named. Crawley were one of them. I think out of all the clubs who were mentioned, about 3/4 of them are absolutely skint. So I was thinking, well, how are they going to afford him? I mean, listen, Notts paid, 60 grand for him, I think, in the end. He scored 20 goals last season. If people really think and believe that nonsense that somebody's going to come and pay in the middle of a pandemic when no clubs have got any money to put together whatsoever, are going to come and pay 150 grand, 200 grand for him. Same with Callum Roberts. You know, a Premier League team's not going to come in for him. Championship, probably still too early for that stage. But Notts would probably be looking at around 500,750,000 for him. Who's got that kind of money? So I really don't see any worries in that respect, because Callum Roberts is just signed a new contract, which he's only just into. Carl Wootton signed, I think, a 3-year deal. So again, that was January, so last year. So again, he's got another 2 years. I really don't see it happening. The only thing I could probably see is if Neil decides to maybe send a few of the loan players back and maybe rejig it that way. And maybe the owners might do what they did last January, which was, hey, listen, we've spotted this player here, Callum Roberts. Do you want him? You know, they've shown they can do that. And maybe they might do that with a centre forward. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with the loan players, isn't it? And Neil said as much to you, I saw in your article. I know from my experience in football that by and large, you loan players out for them to get experience.
Yeah.
And you don't loan them out to get experience in somebody else's training ground or reserves or whatever, because you can do that at your own club. So there's been limited minutes for several of those Notts loan players. And so it will be interesting to see whether the club say, look, you can only have him if you're going to play him more, to which I suspect Neil would say, well, can't guarantee that. And if there are other clubs, then they'll be hauled back, and another club that might say, yeah, we'll definitely play him, that end up going there.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, when we're talking about recruitment, if you go through the team, Slocum, Brindley, Rawlinson, Lacey, Turner, Kelly Evans, the only one player who's been a new signing that started regularly in the team is Jake Reeves. So Ruben Rodriguez obviously started a few games recently.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's pretty much the same team as last season. So the players that they brought in are yet to really sort of make or really stake a claim to prove to us that they're actually better than what Notts have already got. You know, Jake Reeves is easily been their best signing. And maybe that might be something they look at in January. Can they get those loan players of a bit extra quality that can really sort of say, look, I'm going to be knocking on the door. I ain't coming here to sit on the bench sort of thing. And really sort of heap up the competition for the rest of the squad, because I don't see anybody challenging Carl Wootton at the moment for the centre forward position, really. And he could probably do with somebody breathing down his neck. Centre midfield, maybe, is one there, just a little bit something different in terms of getting up and down the pitch. But defensively, I don't think they really need to look at that. So they're so well stocked with quality and versatility back there that I don't really think that needs looking at. And it's not as if they're a concern defensively, because what Neil's done with that back four has been absolutely superb. You know, like I said, second best defensive record in the league at the moment. So in that respect, I just think it's a question of getting those sort of players who can really sort of put pressure on the forward positions and maybe ramp up the competition a little bit.
Who would you say has been Notts' best player so far this season? I'll go first while you're thinking about it. I would say Dion Kelly-Evans. I think he's been Notts' most consistently impressive performer. And it's very difficult to tell whether he's a better right back or left back, because he is able, he's one of those rare breed of people that when he plays on the other flank as a defender, he's equally as effective. He's got a good spring. I like how he can dig the tackles in. There's a celebrated incident against Stockport, wasn't there? He's left a bit on.
Yeah.
The bloke's got wound up, booted him 30 seconds later, got a yellow card, then been substituted. And there's probably Dion Kelly-Evans smiling to himself,
Yeah.
I think he's probably been our most consistent performer this season. Who would you go for?
I mean, I was a big fan of him last year. I think Conor Rawlinson. Honestly, I think Notts have got themselves a fantastic centre half there. The one thing I will say about this squad that Neil's put together. He's certainly making them better players. If I look at the Conor Rawlinson that came in first time round, his distribution of the ball now is absolutely astonishingly good. I mean, yesterday he was spraying passes out wide to Richard Brindley, 30, 40 yards. I was thinking he wouldn't have done that last season. He has come on leaps and bounds in that respect. And not only that, he's a formidable competitor. I mean, I love it. He's got a great attitude. He's quick. He loves a fight. You know, if you want to fight him, he'll fight you. He can pass a ball now. And I think he epitomises everything that Neil wants in a centre half, in that he can also bring the ball out and play through. I mean, for instance, that goal against Stockport that everybody was raving about, it was actually his pass into Carl Wootton that shifted the whole dynamic of that move. So he's got incredibly better as the season has sort of gone on. And for me, I still think he is possibly the best centre-half or one of the best centre-halves in the division on current form. I've not seen anybody better. I don't think. I'm struggling to think of a better centre-half off the top of my head who plays for somebody else. I just think he's improved massively. He was fundamental to the team reaching the playoffs last year. I mean, I remember those two games. I don't know, maybe got cut against Halifax, didn't he? When he took blows to the head. He was wearing his Terry Butcher bandage. I just think he's a fantastic centre-half, a great bit of recruitment. And again, hilariously, you know, when he signed, all the Port Vale fans, he's absolutely rubbish. It just goes to show you, doesn't it? I'd never pay stock to what opposing fans have to say about a player, because he's been absolutely phenomenal. My player of the season last year, and at the way it's going, I think he will be player of the season this year as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, isn't it? And again, I don't disagree, but he didn't play against Harrogate, didn't play in the playoffs at all, you know, and
yeah,
that's an interesting one. I personally, you know, and I'm not being critical here, I think we have been vulnerable at set pieces this season. Not so much now, but at the start of the season, I think we were vulnerable, and you have to look at your centre halves, for me, from set pieces to boss everything, you know.
Well, Ben Turner, that's why I think, but obviously Ben Turner was brought. I know Alex picked up an injury, but Ben Turner gives you sort of that aerial presence and dominance, doesn't he? That I know he had a bad game last night, but he's been terrific apart from yesterday.
I'm a lot older than you. I'm not sure whether I look it or not with that hairstyle you've got on there.
Mate, since taking life his own, got wildlife in it.
I live in an era, you know, when Notts were punching a long way above their weight and would normally get nil and would nick something, you know. And I ain't bothered how they play. Right, I ain't bothered about us having 14% possession if we win 1-0, rather than having 83% possession and spraying it around here, there, and everywhere and losing 1-0. But look, just to prove you and I are not holding a monologue and talking to each other with no one watching at all, Leigh Brearley's. I've got a little. Anyone that's watching us, you can type in notes on the live chat option. So Leigh Brearley, thank you, Leigh. And he's kind of going like what you said earlier, Leigh. We've never replaced Dennis, but would like to see young Jimmy Knowles have some starts. Do you think Jimmy's going to get more game time or not, Leigh?
I mean, I'm told that he's doing really well in training, but again, it's that, you know, he's a teenager, but he's just a boy, isn't he? I mean, you're asking him to come in, and then what happens when he doesn't score for a few games? Then what happens? You know, so you've got to think about players and protecting them. You know, he has shown, and he did show it in pre-season, he does look like that sort of player who has that knack of being in the right place at the right time. But I just don't see it. I just don't see it. I don't see him starting regularly. I think the only thing that might change is if Wes Thomas is back fit for the 9th. I could possibly see Carl and Wes Thomas up front, because they have developed a very good understanding. And Wes, as we've spoken about previously, he's got that experience. He's got that know-how. You know, he's got a little bit of bedevilment. He's played the game. He's been there, seen it, done it.
Yeah, he'll run the channels as well, won't he?
Exactly. He's a very hard worker, and he's a lively centre forward. So I could probably see that happening. Jimmy probably coming off the bench now and again. He did that. I watched him against Morpeth, and I thought he could have used the ball a lot better than what he did, but he ended up scoring a goal. So he has got that in his locker. But it's an interesting one. We'll have to wait and see. I'm fascinated to see what happens sort of in the next coming weeks.
Okay, let's change tack. Let's move on to an ever-developing story, the National League and the distribution of monies. So to recap, the government via lottery money grant-aided a fairly substantial sum of money to the National League for clubs to cover their losses by not being able to have fans coming into the ground. National League obviously covers 3 divisions, not just one. There's the National League North and South as well. And so there was a formula that they played around with to allocate the monies. And effectively, they tried to make it as small a difference as possible with the monies. So the extremes that are quoted are Notts County get £95,000 a month from the funding, average crowd just shy of 6,000. Boreham Wood, average crowd 724, get £85,000. So it's a very narrow discrepancy. So everybody else gets 80 to 85. There was a large amount of criticism from the larger clubs over that distribution. An independent inquiry was set up by the National League to evaluate how those monies had been distributed. They appointed David Bernstein, who I know, former chairman of the FA. I'm not quite sure what the National League expected, but the report has come back, though it's not been made public, very critical of the way the league distributed those monies. The National League have refused to make public the report. The National League's chief executive, Mark Tattersall, has left in inverted commas at the start of this month and gone completely. David Bernstein has gone public with his frustration, saying the National League are not making the report public, have not made it available to other clubs. And there are now calls for Brian Barwick to resign. And there is debate as to how much, whether this funding allocation is going to be changed for January, which was the recommendation of the inquiry that it should. National League are making very little comment. I think this is something that's going to grow and grow and grow. Notts have been critical. There's been various other clubs, votes of no confidence, and all the rest of it. What's your take on the situation, Leigh?
Well, the fact the National League aren't commenting isn't really a surprise, to be honest. I mean, it is an organisation that, you know, you could ask them with a very simple question. You'll never really get an answer. And, you know, the way this money has been allocated and the fact that the report has not been made public is very, very disappointing, really, when you consider, you know, it's public money. So the clubs should have a right to see this report, and the National League has to come up with a very good explanation as to why they've not been able to see this report. So I think it was worked out that Boreham Woods, someone had done a graph or a table of how much clubs were getting and how much it would equate to per person based on their average attendance. I think Boreham Woods was like 118 quid per fan. I mean, the maths just don't stack up, do they? So it almost feels like it doesn't pay to be a big club in the National League at times. That's how it feels to me. Like, it just doesn't, you know, if you're a considerably sized club, it just, you know, things generally tend not to go in your favour, referees being a case in point. But yeah, it's a very strange one. Clearly, obviously, David Bernstein has gone public now, which I thought was good of him, because I thought it's about time that this was put in the open. And now the onus is on the National League to explain how they came up with this equation to, you know, they sort of settled on this arbitrary funding allocation, when I think everybody presumed that it was going to be on average attendances, average gates, and for Notts to get 95,000 and Bournemouth to only get 11 grand less. Again, the maths just don't stack up. But the fact that National League haven't come out and said it is absolutely no surprise to me whatsoever. It's an organisation that needs a complete overhaul. It wants to be taken seriously. They keep on talking about having more automatic spots and being sort of like an extension of the Football League. They're not professional enough for me, in my opinion. I think there are a lot of things that need improving. Communication being prime example. I think that's the most important thing. So obviously Michael Tattersalls gone, so we'll wait and see who comes in and replaces him. And obviously Brian Barwick's under a bit of pressure now, but it's a bit of a messy situation, really.
Yeah, I think one of the massive challenges the National League has is it represents the interests of professional football clubs, and it represents, or tries to represent as well, the interests of semi-professional football clubs. So that, if you look in National League North, National League South, some of those clubs are pulling in 150, 200 fans.
Yeah.
Those players are part-time. And if you look in the National League main division, probably 80% are full-time now, but they are full-time professional football clubs that have been beacons for their local communities for a long time. Wrexham, Stockport, Torquay, Yeovil. And I almost think you've got to have a full-time division, and if you're not going to be full-time, well, you've got to make your choice. In many respects, though it won't happen, I think you would be better off having an extra division of the Football League. Yes. So that all the big, inverted commas, the full-time professional football clubs will be captured in that extra division. There's only York at the minute outside that, you would consider to be a big sized club. And I'm sure with the new stadium just opening for them, they will get that sorted. And I think strikes me that Mark Tattersall and those are trying to represent the best interests of whoever is 23rd in National League South, National League North. But the best interest of that club is totally different to the best interest of Notts County, of Stockport, of Wrexham, or whatever, because they're full-time professional clubs. And it seems nonsensical that, Boreham Wood must be making a profit. Well, I mean, you're right. I don't want to upset anyone at Boreham Wood, but crikey, the money that they're getting in terms of a subsidy from their operating costs compared to what Notts or Wrexham or Stockport are getting, it seems ridiculous. And I think there needs to be some form of sea change in the way the National League, like you said, looks after itself. But it's just so huge. How do you compare a club with 200 fans to 6,000 fans?
Yeah. I mean, I do sympathise. I mean, it must be very difficult. Listen, if they're going to come out and say, look, we did this, we did it this way because X who get 200 fans in the way, if we'd have not done this, they would have gone out of business. I think we could all understand that. But to not sort of come out and explain that that's why they've done it, then you could probably swallow that and go, okay, right, like you say, Chorley, for instance, who get 300, 400 fans, if we'd have not given that money, they would have gone out of business. Nobody wants to see anybody go out of business. So you can sort of understand it, but at the same time, be open about, communicate more, tell us what's going on, explain to us why you've done this, so we can sort of get a grasp rather than this sort of like whispers that you hear here and there. Letters from other chairmen, like I know the Hereford chairman has been very, very vocal.
Yes, he has
about the National League and how it's allocated this money.
And a cynic, Lee, would also look back. Do you remember the debacle over playoffs?
Yes.
Absolute debacle over playoffs. We're not having them. Big clubs complain. Oh, yeah, we are. And I think one of the accusations or one of the comments from David Bernstein is a conflict of interest, with members and clubs and how they have their say in that executive board, if you like. But as you quite rightly say, there needs to be a lot more transparency in how this is all communicated. One, to the public, but two, by the sounds of it, the clubs themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the communication is non-existent. For example, we get sent. I mean, Michael Tattersall was going. Obviously, when Michael Tattersall, they announced they were going, I think we got the press release through 5 minutes before it got announced. Just things like that. Big issues like the playoffs. The allocation of this public money, the lottery money. All you ask for is that transparency, being told what's going on, explain it. Don't let us try and work it out on the basis of Chinese whispers. That's my biggest problem with football is, it is a bit too secret. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the people who are only winding up are the fans because they want to know what's going on. Just like me and you want to know what's going on. They pay their hard-earned money. They pay for the streams. Why shouldn't they know what's going on at the head of the division? So I think that's something that moving forward, whoever comes in to replace Michael Tattersall, and if Brian Barwick ends up staying or going or whatever, that is, their communication is non-existent. It's so poor. If you compare it to the likes of the Football League and the Premier League, it's miles behind it. And to have this sort of ambition to be almost an extension of the Football League and be a Division 5, if you like, they're miles off it at the moment. They're miles off it in terms of professionalism and the communication and how they handle things.
There's lots of comments coming in now. You'll be delighted to know. Ian McQuillan, it's only 5 words. Lee, Lee, you need a haircut. Yes, there you go. Get yourself an appointment. Now, COVID is clearly causing increasing problems, and there looks to be a real now problem fulfilling fixtures. There's talk even Premier League taking a 2-week suspension in January. Malcolm Shearston, and there was another gentleman whose name escapes me who actually submitted one on social media before he started. Malcolm says, I see that Sutton United are postponed this Saturday as well as us. Why can't they arrange to play each other on Saturday? That was the gist of the comment that was submitted on social media earlier. With these games being postponed, is there any way you can then, who's both not got a game, play?
Really good question. That is a very good question.
Ask the National League. You won't get a response, but
yeah, well, you probably would, but probably at the end of the season. I don't know. It's a really good question, actually. I'm not sure whether.
I don't know whether there's a minimum time period, but the point that Malcolm's making, and it's a very valid one.
Yeah, so
we'll all complain that we've got to play 3 games a week in bloody March or April, right? Whereas if 2 teams are without a game, if 2 teams and both do not have COVID issues, there are no transport logistics as such. There's no fan logistic because all it is a stream. Do managers perhaps say, well, we can't scout that team, but it's kind of the same for both? I don't know, because we want football on, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. And it's actually a worthwhile way of sort of easing the fixture headache. I mean, I spoke to Neil about it last night. I think at the end of January, I think they play Saturday, Tuesday, pretty much for 2 weeks. And then in February, I think they play Saturday, Tuesday for 5 weeks. Yeah. So why can't you sort of alleviate that? I think it's a fantastic point. And I don't know. I'd have to
get on to Jason and the PR department at Notts tomorrow, and let's see what the answer is. We look forward to reading it in the Post.
Well, I'm off tomorrow, so.
You're worse than the National League.
Might go and get an haircut.
I'm just looking at others. So Kelsdyke, he makes the point that really think the most important player we've missed is Wes Thomas. Wootton looks a little lost without him. He's just saying that Neil Ardley said in the press conference that Mrs. Thomas is expecting.
That's right.
Les Brill. No, we've done that one. Sam Cozy. Do you think the owners will lose patience with Neil if we weren't to go up this year?
I don't see it. I think they probably want to see progression. But But that would be promotion. But when they spoke in the summer, they were quite matter of fact about it. I mean, I remember asking them, saying, "Is promotion is that the main?" And they said, "Look, we'd like it, but we can't demand it." Obviously they're very stats based heavy, and I know they do a fair score table where they analyse the games and base it on XG and games they should have won based on their opportunities and where Notts should be in the table based on those statistics. And I think Notts should be second. And
I judge it on the scoreline and points.
Pardon?
I judge it on scoreline and points, but what do I know?
Yeah, but you see, again, I mean, so it boils down to that whole, creating chances, putting them away. If that's what the table should be, it tells you that the reason why they're not second in the league and breathing down Torquay's neck is because they're not scoring enough goals. They're not winning the games that they should be. I mean, think back to Dagenham was another game, 0-0. I think Carl Wootton had a couple of chances. I mean, going back to the Carl Wootton thing again, I've noticed, he didn't have a clear-cut chance yesterday. I don't think he had one against Stockport. So, it's not as if he's getting a bundle of chances at the moment. So, again, that's something that could probably do with looking at. But again, obviously Neil has sort of made the system, sort of built the system around him, where the fact that obviously they like to play off him, and obviously the wingers come inside and come towards the centre of the pitch and, expects other people to chip in with goals. So, interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of one of those that you have to let this season, and I know the question Sam makes that point, but ultimately, I think any decision like that takes care of itself in that you judge what happens over the next 30 games or whatever it is in the league, because I think a lot of people can very, very quickly fall into the trap of judging things part way through a season. It frustrates me immensely.
Yeah.
When managers are given new contracts. Yeah. 4 months into a new season with the team top. Now, if you believe you've got the next Mourinho, the next Danny Cowley, by all means. But a lot of the time, managers get new contracts. And then weeks later, all the fans conveniently forget. They lose 6 on the trot. And the chairman ends up sacking him, and it costs him a load more money. You judge a manager. You can't judge Neil on 14 games this season.
No.
Any whatever judgment that needs to be done will be done on 44 games. We might have come top and not got beat the last 15 games of the season. Neil Ardley is the Messiah. He's in a much better place then to get a much better contract for himself. Yeah. If we finish outside the playoffs, I think you have a long sit down, don't you? It's up to the owners, not us. You have a long sit down. If you're in the playoffs, you kind of got to make the judgment, can someone else do better?
Yeah.
Alan Hardy, in the time when Kevin was here, there was the headache after hangover, call it what you will, after the playoff defeat to Coventry. Alan thought he could get a better manager in and deliver better results by replacing Kevin. Now, hindsight would tell you, like many people, I'm sure Kevin would not have had that team relegated. Yeah. But Alan was making a judgment based on, well, we've had a load of money and we should be automatically doing this and this and this. But, went through a whole bag of players, 2 more managers, and we were worse than Kevin was at the start of the season. So I see no one else capable of doing a better job, Neil, this season. And that the owners make those decisions when the season has panned out.
I mean, I think he's a fantastic manager. The way that Notts play, I mean, you can see what a good coach is. You can see the way they like to play. You can see there's a plan. You can see there's an identity. That's it's another big thing of mine. Sometimes managers get jobs. You struggle to see what the plan is. You can clearly see what the plan is with Neil. You can clearly see he wants the full-backs to bomb. You can clearly see he likes the wingers to come inside into the centre of the pitch. You can see how well coached they are. The players are used to it. Good repetition on the training ground. It's second nature to them. I think he's a superb manager, and I think he's a great character. He's a great fit for Notts in terms that he's a humble character, and he appreciates the history of the club, and he understands the passion of the fan base. And, you know, crucially, he's not been afraid to get out into the community. You know, during COVID, he was ringing the supporters up.
Yeah.
He's had to fight a lot of fires since he's come in. The first season, obviously, when they got relegated from the Football League, we all know what happened there. Then he comes in, takeover got finished late, so he ended up having to build a team in the sort of first 3 weeks of the season. He did that, managed to get them to into a position where you thought they were going to go and challenge for the title. They looked like they were going to go and close Barrow down because they had Harrogate to play, and Barrow had some very difficult games to play without the centre forward, of course, quickly because he'd been sent off, and we all wondered how that was going to affect it. Then the pandemic hits when they're in great form. Then there's, like you say, there's this nonsense about the playoffs, so they're going to get played or they're not going to get played. Produce a fantastic performance against Barnet, and at that point you're thinking it's all going to go. And then, of course, it all boils down to that one game. You know, Wembley, can you turn it on for that one game? And unfortunately, the style and sort of swashbuckling qualities that we've seen from Notts, it just wasn't there on the day. It just wasn't there, and that can happen. It's Wembley. It does funny things to teams, doesn't it? So, and, you know, if they were to get there again, I think they would have a better understanding because a lot of that squad played in that game. So if they were to get there again, I don't think it would be as much of an issue as it was perhaps this time around, with the fact there was such a long break and then they had to go and sort of play the playoffs. So, but I mean, I really like the way Notts play. I think they're very attractive on the eye. I mean, you listen to other managers talk about Neil as well. I think Pete Wild at Halifax was saying Neil Ardley is a mentor to me. You know, the way he gets his teams to play. A lot of managers say Notts probably the best passing team in the division. You know, they're not just saying it for the sake of it. You know, not so. He's done a fantastic job in that respect of changing his philosophy. Because I think when you remember the Football League, he was quite direct, wasn't he? I think he played 4-3-3. It was sort of up and at 'em football. Wasn't afraid to go long, but he's this time now he's had the chance to settle down, build his own squad. He's changed his philosophy. And, there's been some fantastic performances to watch. I just wish that Notts were a bit more ruthless in front of goal.
Let's finish the owners. The club's annual report accounts were published a couple of weeks ago. So you've obviously written stories on that, sifted through that. I think everybody is impressed with the ownership. They've gone about their business in a very professional, efficient, understated manner. And in the background, there is clearly, let us say, substantial family money, that is there, that can give stability and the ability for Notts County to ride out this pandemic, irrespective of whatever lottery money ends up being allocated to the club. You've spoken, I think not often, but you've done at least one interview with them. How do you find the owners?
I think they're absolutely fantastic, Paul. I really do. I think I like the way they conduct their business. They're silent but efficient. They do all the right things. And what impresses me most about them, and you'll know this because you've been around the game and you know it like the back of your hand, but you get chairmen who act on emotion. They can't separate the emotion from their decision making. So, like you would say, team loses 5 on the spin, all of a sudden the chairman's in the office and he's like wanting to know why. I remember a story about Ray True going into the office saying what a load of crap that was. They don't do that. They're very sort of, they take a step back. They just allow the manager to get on it. They've got the conduit, obviously Richard Montague, Neil and Richard have a very good relationship, and Neil has a very good relationship with the owners, and it just feels that the club is in a much stable position. It doesn't feel at all knee-jerk, and I think the benefits of that you're seeing out on the pitch. If a club is in disarray off the pitch, usually it'll be in disarray on it. So I think you can sort of see from having this sort of stable position and being stable in the background. I mean, again, you talk about the owners and finances. I think they were probably, if I recall this rightly, I think only one of a handful of clubs who never put the players on furlough. They paid them throughout all of that, which you have to say, I mean, credit to them, absolutely fantastic. So, they've done all right. They've invested when needed. They bought Carl Wootton. They bought Callum Roberts, obviously, paid a nominal fee for him. The recruitment's by and large been excellent. So I think they're exciting times. You just got to start getting it right on the pitch, and it almost feels like they're almost there. That's how it feels. It feels like they're almost. It's almost there. You can almost touch it, but it just feels to be lacking that. I don't know, sort of that the finishing touch. That sort of, again, I'm going to probably repeat myself here. That sort of fantastic goal scorer. The Leigh Hughes, for instance. Somebody who can score 25, 30 goals, because that would do it. That's all they're missing for me. That is all they're missing. If they get somebody like that who 25, 30 goals, they'll be laughing.
I mean, all the dodgy attributes of unsuccessful chairman, since Derek Pavis has left, every single Notts chairman in some way, shape or form, or owner, and I would include the trust in this as well, have kind of exhibited all the wrong characteristics that you've alluded to there, that's ultimately cost them. In many respects, Notts' recent problems over the last 10 years, a lot of it has not been down to a lack of money.
No, the money.
There were times when Ray pulled the drawbridge up, as we heard from Sean Derrick, probably the most popular podcast we have done. And you would know when he pulled the drawbridge up at exactly, I would suggest, and Sean was saying, and probably you would agree, pulled the drawbridge up after the great escape at Oldham. All the best players went because, we're not going to pay them their wages. Yeah. End result, cost him a lot more money, ended up being relegated, getting through another load of managers. But there were times when Ray did spend spent a lot of money.
I remember spending 125.
For all his ills, spent a lot of money and lost a lot of money. And before that, Notts had a whole succession of owners, ego trips, and those sorts of things. I would say that, and look, clearly, there's a long way to go yet, because the Reach brothers, the Reach family, are still very much in the early stages of owning this, the embryonic stages. But the way they go about their business, I would say, is probably the best since Jack done it. You're far too young to remember. Jack was an MP in London.
Jack, yeah.
Right? He didn't live in Nottingham. He used to come up on a Friday afternoon, and he'd meet the manager, meet the commercial director, meet the club secretary, go to the game on Saturday. You never saw him. And he trusted the people at the club to let them carry on. And clearly he had a very good handle of empowering other people. Wasn't interested in ego, publicity, or whatever as a football club owner. And I think that, there are some very early parallels to be drawn with the Football Radar business being in London. They are relatively, as I understand this, hands off. They're not rushing up and down the motorway. We know what's happening here, all the rest of it. They're available by phone. They'll develop proper professional relationships. And that's increasingly difficult to find, and I think we're not so very, very fortunate that there is, I believe, a substantial substance to the family and the investment that they can make in this football club. And that's very, very important, because if we look at the East Midlands, every single club in the East Midlands, with the exception, and they'll be struggling this year, of Burton, every one of those clubs is beholding to the personal funding of the owner. So if you look over the River Trent, Nottingham Forest's financial status is totally indebted to Evangelos Marinakis and his continued commitment to the club. At Mansfield, it is entirely dependent on John Radford. At Derby County, it is entirely dependent on Mel Morris. At Leicester City, it is entirely dependent on the Tyonas family. Because without that commitment of reserves to cover operating costs, you're dead in the water. You are dead in the water. And I think that's what one of the single biggest benefits that the Reach brothers can bring to us at the minute. They have the capability to ride out challenges. Every one of those clubs I've just mentioned, I don't think any one of them makes a profit. I don't think. At the end of the day, there might be an odd year when they have a great cup run or Leicester win the league and you make money.
Yeah.
The reality in modern day football is it's virtually impossible to run a club on a regular basis at a profit. The owner has to loan money, whatever you want to call it, to put it into a football club. And I think we're very fortunate with our current owners that they have that capability to put that money in. Because ultimately Ray wasn't prepared or didn't have that money at the end, which is why Alan bought it. And then Alan blew all his money on the football club. I think these guys are going to exhibit patience, which I think is important. And I think that puts us in a good position. But we as fans, not you as a journalist, we as fans, that will very, very quickly run out. In 3 more years, if this club is still in the National League, we won't be saying, oh, they're great and all the rest of it. We won't. As fans, the expectation is that this is a Football League club and we're currently on loan to the National League. And that's always going to be the challenge here at Notts at the moment.
Yeah, and listen, it's the worst division to be in for that as well.
To get out, absolutely.
One position to get up. You to get automatic promotion, you've got to win the title, and 23 other teams have all got the same ambition to do that, and you need a lot of things to fall into place. You need a lot of luck. It is the hardest division. I personally feel, I don't think from sort of the games that I've seen this season are any different or any worse than what I saw in League Two in Notts' final season when they went down. I don't think the gulf in class, it was proven in the FA Cup, wasn't it? The amount of National League sides that ended up knocking out Football League teams was incredible. So I actually don't think there's a bit of gulf. I'd like to see 3 down, 3 up from the National League. So that
will never happen, Lee.
Because I know, because
Turkish for Christmas.
Yeah.
That ain't going to happen.
But at some point, you've got to look and say, well, because there's a lot more professional clubs in the National League now. I think there's, I'm trying to think how many teams are part. I know we spoke to, obviously, Stephen Clee last week. They're sort of almost full-time, aren't they, in the fact that they train three times a week?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of full-time big clubs as well. Chesterfield, Wrexham, Stockport, Hartlepool. You can Yeovil. You can reel them off. If York come up, that's another one. So I would, that it does feel like another sort of a sort of football league, an extension of the football league. So let's have that sort of 3 up, 3 down. But like you say, it never happened because turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and they just you want to protect your own land. But I'd like to think that it would change at some point. It'd be nice to think it could change because it's been 2 up for too long now, and you've got to win. You've either got to be brilliant and win the title all year round, or you've got to get in the playoffs and hope you get lucky, basically, because it's a lottery, isn't it? Anything can happen.
Okay, we've run over. There's not a problem. Thank you very much. It seems ridiculous, doesn't it, that we're trying to get games in, and obviously, Malcolm Shearston's point earlier, which I'm sure you can check out and let us all know. Can games be rearranged at short notice? If it's too late for Saturday, is it a principle that the league and clubs are going to look at to infill, if you like? Because it certainly happens with cup rounds. I can remember when clubs have rearranged league games when they've both got a blank weekend, because if they get knocked out the cup. So there's a precedent here. So that would be interesting. Otherwise, Eastleigh away, isn't it? Another short trip for you. If you didn't get back, from Meadow Lane to Lincoln until 9:10 on Saturday, I dread to think what time you're going to be getting back from Eastleigh. Oh, is it a week on Saturday when we play them? Bloody hell!
Yeah, it's a fair while now. January 9th, isn't it? I mean,
it's a week Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a week
so
Saturday.
Again, one game in 2 weeks, another break. We've already had 3 weeks off with COVID. Then they obviously didn't play Yeovil, did they? So that's 3 times it's been affected. So, it's been a real strange season in that respect. And then you look at the top, and Torquay, I think, have only had one sort of COVID game called off. You look at poor old Solihull Moors. I think they're lagging behind everybody else. It's been a strange old season, but we'll see what happens when they go to Eastleigh. I mean, Eastleigh were up there, weren't they, in the early sort of part of the campaign, and they dropped like a stone. And Halifax, when Notts played them, I think were in the bottom four or something ludicrous like that. Now they're on the edge of the playoffs. So just goes to show you how tightly congested the league is. But if you can put a run together like they have, it just goes to show how far it can take you.
We will be back next Monday. We're hoping to have, without giving too much away, but I'm sure people can work it out, we're hoping to be joined, and you're welcome to join us again, we're hoping to be joined by a former manager of both clubs. And I think there's only one, so you should be able to work that one out. Nothing signed, sealed, and delivered, but we're hoping to have a former manager of both clubs helping us look ahead to that one next week. Also, I'd just like to mention a very loyal former Notts employee and huge Notts County supporting family, Lorraine Wolster, who worked at Notts for 2 or 3 decades. She's quite poorly at the minute and is needing some quite serious health care. And I've been contacted by members of her family. If you go onto the various Notts County Facebook pages, there are details of how you can possibly help. But I think many of you would remember Lorraine from selling lottery tickets to working into the club's various departments for many years, and also being a huge supporter, as indeed are 3-4 generations of her family. So please take a look at that. We're also hoping, my son permitting, to have a bit of a compilation episode of all of the guests we've had on in the first 23 episodes of the show, which we're hoping to have out on New Year's Eve. If you've got nothing better to be doing, clearly no one's going to be out on New Year's Eve. So, if you're at a loose end, please look into that. Leigh, as always, thank you very, very much indeed for your support. Your first job is...
Pardon?
What's your first job as a result of this podcast?
Trimier.
Just about. And what's the very close second you've got to do?
Hey?
What's the very close second job you've got to do?
Retweet this.
Yeah, that's important. Third.
Oh, find out about the rearranged games.
Yeah, because clearly there's a market. We all want to know. And if you don't know, clearly no Notts fans know. So we look forward to the definitive answer on infilling the National League calendar for Notts.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
I would ask the National League, but I'll be waiting for a reply by the pigeon, I think. So,
and the fourth is get a proper light bulb in that room.
I know. Well, yeah, it is. It's not the greatest room. I've got to be honest. Yeah.